Good evening, everyone. Welcome to first one of the InspiHER V2.0, the place where you can gain knowledge and showcase your brilliance. I'm Kasundi Leela Golle, signing in as the moderator for the day. As we embark on this inspiring journey, now I invite Mayoni Gamage, co-chairperson of InspiHER V2.0, to deliver the welcome speech and Melta Anurag address the gathering. Mayoni, the virtual floor is open.
Thank you, Kasundi. Am I audible?
Yes, Mayoni. Yes, Mayoni, you're audible. Sorry, there's a technical issue. Please wait a few minutes. Sorry, that's a technical issue. Ladies and gentlemen, our valuable guest speaker and honored participants, a very good evening to each and every one of you. Today, we mark the momentous occasion as the beginning of the phase one of InspireTech V2.0. It is with immense pleasure and excitement that I extend a warm welcome to all of you on behalf of the organizing committee. As we embark on this month-long journey, let us embrace the opportunity to learn from one another, exchange perspectives, and build lasting relationships. First of all, I would like to take this opportunity to warmly welcome our honored guest speaker, Mr. Pramakavera Singha, lecturer of the University of Peradeniya, who is the keynote speaker of the day one of this workshop. Your expertise will undoubtedly enrich the minds of all these attendees. And to all the participants, your presence here today is what makes this event come to life. Your enthusiasm, passion, and commitment to the session and competition are the driving forces behind the success of InspiHER. As we declare the MATLAB workshop officially open, let us embrace the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. May this event be a source of inspiration, learning, and collaboration for all of us. Once again, a warm welcome to each and every one of you to the MATLAB workshop series of the InspireTech V2.0. Today, we embark on this journey to encourage and support female undergraduates and also the young generations in their pursuit of success and professional growth. With further ado, let's move forward with our agenda. Today is the very first day of our MATLAB workshop series. This session is based on the topic Introduction to Python, which will be useful to learn about machine learning in our upcoming sessions. Moving on with the event proceedings, we have our esteemed guest speaker to conduct the session. He serves as a committed lecturer at the University of Peradeniya, specializing in digital image processing and computer vision. As a professional educator and a champion for narrowing the digital gap, he dedicated to modeling the next wave of tech-savvy mind. Now, I hand over the virtual stage to Mr. Pramakavera Singha to conduct the session. Over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you everyone for joining for today's session. So without taking much time, let me start today's session. So let me share my screen first, and also turn on my video. Right. Hope you can see me. Right. So let me share my screen first. So is the screen visible? So can anyone tell me if the screen
Yes,
is
sir, it's visible.
right? Thank you. Okay. So we'll start today's session. So today's session will be about introduction to Python programming and also a little bit of image processing. So I think yesterday I talked about why in the your opening ceremony kind of talked about why Python is important for you to learn. If you were there, you might know why. Again, I'll just tell you a little bit. So Python is one of the most popular programming languages today, especially for the fields of data science and AI. If you take the PYPL or Global Popularity Index of programming languages, this is like the global standard, which basically ranks different kinds of programming languages. You can see that Python is still rank 1, and it has been like this for more than a decade right now. So it's been one of the most popular languages to learn. So you can see all the other languages are there. So Python is still number 1 in the world. So that's why it's very important, because Python has its own way of programming and different kinds of libraries that will help you to work with different tasks in data science and in artificial intelligence. So we'll first get hands-on experience with the basics, and then you can move forward, right? So when you first want to work with Python, you can just go to the Python download website. Just type Python download, and you can go to the Python website, and you'll see something like this. So I'm not going to go into detail on how to install. If you have any questions, you can just drop me after the session, and even just drop me an email. So I'm not going to cover the installation part here, because that's going to take a little bit of time. So I think all of you can download this very easily. Just download this setup for Python, and then just simply install it in your machine. So you can just go to this downloads page and just click on the appropriate version, and you can download the appropriate version of Python. So once you download Python to your machine, you will have things like this. So once you search for Python in your machine, you'll get different applications. So there's an application called IDLE. This is kind of an IDE, an integrated development environment. So what do you mean by an integrated development environment? It is kind of a software environment that basically has been built for programming, right? Programming and tasks. So it's going to basically ease your programming experience. So there are many types of IDEs available. So I'm going to talk about a few, but I'll basically move on to some interesting IDEs for Python. So this idle is one of the most basic IDEs that you have for Python. So if I just go to idle, you'll get kind of a window like this. So this is kind of how it's going to look, right? Python idle. So you can see it's basically like a console, a little bit like the console. So you can type Python code here. For example, I'm just gonna type a very simple code. So any programming language will have a kind of a syntax to basically display something on screen. So if you want to display something on screen, you have these commands called print commands. So even in Python, you have this print command, which is the most basic command. So if you want to print something, I just type print, and I can give two brackets, so you call them parentheses, and inside the parentheses I can print something. So important thing is, if you are printing something like a number, you just can print a number. For example, if I say 45, if I press enter, you can see 45 is displayed on screen. See, so I'm just simply printing a number. So it's not hard, right? So just type print, and then the two parentheses, and inside the parentheses you can give a number, and then that number will be printed, right? This is how you can print any number. If you want to print a word, so we normally call this a string in programming. A word is called a string, which is a collection of characters. So if you want to print a string, what you need to do is you can do the same thing. The only difference is now you should basically give your string or your word inside quotation marks. It can be inside single quotation marks or double quotation marks. So for example, I'll say, welcome to Python. And now you can see it's printed, right? So if you want to print a string or word, if you or normal word, unlike printing a number, the difference is you should give quotation marks. So you can give either single quotes or double quotes. So I'll give double quotes and show you the same thing. So you can do that as well. Right? So it still works, right? So you can either give single quotes or double quotes, doesn't matter. So this is a very some simplest commands in Python or any programming language. It's basically going to do what you basically tell them. So this syntax is basically to print something or display something on screen, right? So the print command. So we'll go into detail on these things in this session. So now you might see that I basically typed a command here, and I press enter, and I get the output straight away in the next line, right? So this is again a very important and interesting feature of the Python programming language. Now, other languages, if you take, for example, Java, which is one of the programming languages, popular programming languages today, it doesn't have this feature. You can't just run the program like this. You can just write the code, and you can just press enter, and you don't get the output in the next line. The reason that Python gives this output in the next line is because Python is called an interpreter based language, not a compiler-based language. So what do you mean by that is, now what really happens is this, when you write this piece of code, it gets converted into binary, and then this computer understands what that is, and then it basically executes the command. Now, for this to happen, you need to have something, some software that can convert this command into binary. That part we don't see, right? But it happens in the background. So what really happens is there's these things called language translators, which translates the language from one format to another. So one of the language translators that are available is called compilers and interpreters. So a compiler, what it does is it basically takes the whole code at once and then converts into uh, binary code. But an interpreter will take your code line by line and it will convert line by line into binary. So this is why Python prints this in the next line, because it's an interpreter language. It takes line by line and converts this code into binary and gives you the output. So that's why you see this output just in the next line. So you can just print line by line, right? But you can also write multiple lines and basically run them at once, right? So that's also possible, right? I'll tell you that as well. So this is one of the most basics way you can start Python in your computer. Install Python and then you'll get this idle, Python idle, which is a shell, and you can write Python code here and run, right? That's one way to do it. And if you want to write multiple lines of code, not just single lines, just multiple lines of code at once, what you have to do is go to File and go to New File. Then you'll get a file like this. Here you can write multiple commands at once, right? So unlike in the console, you can write multiple commands at once. That's the beauty of having this. So just go to File and New, and you'll get this window, and you can just simply type any Python command here, and you can just save it. And once you save the file, so I'll try to save it and show you. Save, and let me save it. Okay, right. So I'll just give it a name called, let's say, first. So remember, all your Python files will be basically saved with an extension .py, for example. So just like in other files in your like other files in your computer, for example, if you take a text file will have the extension .txt, and let's say a Word document will have .docx. So there are different types of extensions that basically tells the computer what kind of file that is. So if it's a Python file, it should be saved with the extension .py. So let me save this file for now. I'll go to the file where I saved it. So here is my file that I saved. If you can see it. So this is the file, right? I just saved the file here. So if I go to the properties of this file, you can see the extension of this file is .py. See, so any Python file will have the extension .py, and then it will work, right? So what you have to do now is you just simply have to run this file and then it will work. So when I run this file, what I have to do it, I just go to my, so I'll just come out of this. So you have this run option here on the top. Go to run and go to run module. And now you can see it has run and given me the output. See, so earlier I only ran one line. Now I can run multiple lines. So if you want to run multiple lines, you should go to the new window, file new, and get the new window, and you can write all the code here, right? And you can basically run it. Okay. Hope you understood that part. So that's just like the most basics of how to get started with Python, right? So for today, I have just made some kind of material in a different way. So I'm not going to use idle for this session. I'll use something called Jupyter Notebook, which I will tell you how you can install that a little later in this session. So I'll just go to the note first, and I will just start off and then go from there, right? So this is Jupyter Notebook for you. The beauty of Jupyter Notebook is you have the ability of basically writing text and code together in a single file, in a very nicely formatted file. As you can see, you can give headings, you can give paragraphs, you can give links, and also you can write Python code as well. So which is very nice. You can keep it this like a note, right? Like a notebook, what you write in your in the university, when you want to write some notes, lecture notes, you might use a book. So something like that, you can just keep this like a book, so which is a very nicely formatted version. So we'll start with the basics. So this I think you saw the most basic command in Python, which is the print command, where you can basically use that command to print something on screen. So next, then you can use Python like a normal calculator as well. So you can just add numbers, multiply numbers, subtract numbers. For example, here, if you can see, I have done 4 plus 3.9. It gives me the output as 7.9. For example, if I want to, let's say, do a multiplication, let's say 45 into 3 or something, for example. And then to run this, okay, so to run this, you can click on this run button, or you can click the shortcut key in your keyboard, Shift Enter, right? So to run this cell, you can call this a cell. I'll tell you what this is when we discuss about Jupyter Notebook a little later, but for now, I'll just discuss Python, the Python syntax. So to run this, you can either run this with the run button, or maybe run it with the shortcut key, Shift and Enter. So if I run this, you can see you get the output here, right? So that's one way of doing it. So Python, like any other programming language, can be used like a calculator. You can just add numbers, subtract numbers, multiply numbers, divide numbers, and so on, right? Right. Next, we'll come to variables in Python. So if you're going into variables, you should know what a variable is and why do you need a variable. So when you basically program or give instructions to the computer, there are certain times where you need to store something and use it later in your code or in your program. For example, let's say you want to store the marks of a student, and then you want to display the marks at a later time in your program. So for that kind of a task, you need to create variables. We call them variables. So what do you mean by a variable is, so it's like this. So you have a variable name, and then you can put the equal sign, and you can give a variable value. So this is how you create variables in Python. Simply give a variable name here, and then you give the assignment. We call this the assignment operator. You assign a value to this variable, right? So you can give a value, any value you want. So what happens when you do this is this variable value will be assigned to this variable. So it's always starting from right side and going to left side. So this variable value assigned to this variable. So for example, let's say you want to create a variable called marks, and you equal it to, let's say, 76. So what you mean by this is you're basically assigning 76 to the variable called marks. So if I do like this, print marks, what should I get? The result, the output. So I say marks equals 76, and I'm printing the mark. So then I should get the output as 76 because I'm printing the same variable. See here, I'm printing the same variable. So this is the beauty of the variables in Python. So you basically create a variable. What you mean by that is you basically store a value in memory in a separate location, and you give a name for that location. So what happens is you simply have a name that has a value. So you assign a value to a name, and you can simply call this name anywhere in your program, and then you can get this value automatically to that place. That's what happens. So for example, when I print this, it will give me the output as 76, right? So that's how you can use variables. So whenever you are creating variables, just like before, if you are creating numbers, numerical variables like this, you can just give the number. If you are creating string variables, for example, name equals, and you have to give within double quotes or single quotes, right? So example, I'll just say John. So you can create different kinds of variables like this. So you can create variables with decimal numbers. For example, let's say price equals 89.56 or something. So you can have different types of values. You can have whole numbers, you can have strings, you can have decimal numbers, so you call them floating point numbers. You can have all these types of variables values, and you can store different values in different kinds of names, right? So this is how you basically use variables in Python, and you can just print them. So we'll just see a small example for that. So I have given many examples here, you just to run them. So you can see a equals 12 here, a equals 12, and when I just simply print a, I just give a, it will print me the value, right? 12, right? So if I change this value, for example, I'll put it as 78, and now if I run it again, now I get 78 here, right? So you can create values very easily, right? So we'll see an interesting example just to understand variables. You can see this example, you have x equal to 10, y equal to 12, and then another variable called t is equal to x plus y. So now t is equal to x plus y, but x is 10, y is 12. So t will have to be 22. So automatically if you print t, it will give 22y. 22 comes how? X will be 10 and y will be 12. So then 10 plus 12 will be 22. So t becomes 22. So you can keep different types of variables like this, right? For example, here you have count x equal 10, count y equals 12, total count equals count x plus y. That means 10 plus 12. And again, you get the output as 22, right? So you can basically keep different values in different variables, and you can add them, you can subtract them, you can do many things, and you can create different applications by using variables. So the main use of variables is to store values to be used at a later time in your program, right? Right, and then you have many operators available. So to do mathematical operations, I think you already know what addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division is. So to do addition, you have the plus operator. To do subtraction, you have the minus operator. And then for multiplication, you have the asterisk, right? Remember that is important. So multiplication is asterisk, the star symbol in the keyboard. And for division, it is the slash, forward slash, right? The single forward slash is called division. But there are three more that we normally don't come across in our normal day-to-day life normally. So one is called exponential, the exponent, and then the floor division and the remainder. What do you mean by this? Exponent means the power. So for example, 3 to the power 4 or 2 to the power 4. If you want to do something like that, you can use exponent operator. And then floor division means once you divide a value, let's say you get, for example, a value after you divide, let's say you divide 20 by 3, then you get something like 5 point something, right? So 5 points, some value. So then you always round down. Floor division means you always round down. That means if you get 5.4, you still take 5. If you take 5.6, you still take 5 because it's basically rounding down, not round up, round down. So whatever decimal value you get, you always round to the least value, least whole number, right? If it's 5.6, you say 5. So you always get the whole value, the whole number of the decimal value of the lower one, the lower limit, right? So that's what floor division means, right? So for example, here you can see 27, so yeah, 9 divided by floor. So 9 divided by 4 is 2.25. But if you do floor division, it is 2. Why? It is always rounding down to the nearest whole number, right? Okay. Right. And then what do you mean by remainder? It's again a very important one. You call them this as the modulus operator in many languages. So this is called the remainder or the modulus operator. It gives you the remainder after you divide a number by another number. So for example, if you divide 9 by 4, so you have the remainder, how much? Remainder will be 1, right? So 4 times 2 is 8, and then you have 1 remaining. So the answer will be 1. So that's how it is. For example, I'll just do that here and show you. So I'll print 9 and percentage 4. And then if I run this, you can see the output is 1. The last output is 1. So what happened is I printed this 9 modulus 4. What happens? It divides 9 by 4 and gives me the remainder. So 4 times 2 is 8, and you have 1 remaining. So it will give the remainder, right? So like this, there are many uh, arithmetic operations that you can do for values. So you can create variables and you can do all these operations for the variables as well, right? Okay, right. So let me go to the next part. Right. So whenever you give variable or variable names, you need to basically be very careful when you give names to variables. So whenever you give variable names, you should give names that should not start with numbers, right? So for example, it's like this. Whenever you are giving names for variables, these are valid names. So giving names like this is fine, but you can't give names like this, for example, like this. So you can't start with numbers. It should always start with a letter, right? And it can't start with special characters like at or hash or dollar, right? It can't start with special characters. It can't start with numbers. It should always start with a letter. So the letter is normally in lowercase. We don't write uppercase. That's a standard in programming. When we give variable names, you always start with a lowercase letter, not an uppercase letter, right? That is also important. And whenever you have, let's say, multiple names, if your variable have multiple names, for example, let's say, I'll say IT marks. So you can't write like this, IT marks like this. So you can't keep spaces between variables. Okay, that's another important thing. Whenever you are giving variable names, you can't have spaces between the variables. You should have always write it without spaces, or else you can keep an underscore between the names. That's also possible. Either keep an underscore or just type it together. You can't have spaces between names. When you have multiple names or multiple words in your variable name, you can't keep spaces. So make sure that you don't do that. Those are some of the rules that you have to follow whenever you give names for variables, right? Okay. Okay. So there are many types of examples here. You can go through them when I share. So I'm not going to like do everything today because it's going to take time. Right. So, right. Okay. Right. The next thing is now, just like you do arithmetic operations on numbers, you can do some operations on strings or words. For example, if you do something like this, let me take a new code block here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create two variables with two string variables, and I'm going to combine those two strings together. For example, I'll say string1 equals, let's say, uh, ABC, and string2 equals to DEF, right? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to print string1 plus string2. Now you might be wondering what's happening here, right? So let me zoom in for better. So you have string1 as ABC, string2 as DEF. I'm printing string1 plus string2. So if this was a number, it basically adds the two numbers and gives you the result. But now the problem is this is not a number, it's a string. Then what happens is when you basically add two strings, what really happens is these two strings will combine together. So if I run this and show you, you can see these two strings have been combined together. See, ABC and DEF. So whenever you use the plus operator on two strings or on strings, it's basically going to combine the strings. So you call this as the concatenation operator, right? The concatenation operator. So what do you mean by concatenation is you combine two things together, right? So if you do that for strings, you can do it, but you can't do subtraction and division. Those are not possible for strings, right? You can only do the addition part. Don't do the subtraction and division. They won't work, right? And if you want to keep a space between these two, now you can see there's no space, it's basically combined together. You can do something like this. You can add a space. So to give a space, you type two quotation marks, and inside the quotation marks, you give a space. And then you should again concatenate that. So look at this. What I have done here is I have combined the string with a space. So how do you give a space? You have quotation marks and you give a space. So you just type two quotation marks and give a space. And then that space is again combined with the other string. So I have now two concatenation operations happening. Space with string 1 and space with string 2. So then the space will be in the middle, two strings will be in the end, and I'll have a space in the middle. So if I run this, now you can see there is a space in the middle, right? So you can give spaces like this, right? So it's very easy. So you can basically work with strings like this, okay? Right. The next one is, okay, so if you want to get an input from the user. So for example, for now, so far we have discussing how to get an output, how to get an output, how to display something on screen. If you want to get a keyboard input from the user, this is how we do it. You have this command called input here, right? So you can give a variable and then type input here and give a name, right? So let me first comment these two and so that you can understand. And so what this is again, so to comment, I'll tell you what that is, right? So just focus on these two lines for now. So there's a variable called name and it is equal to something called input, and then please type your name here, text, right? And then finally I'm printing the name. So what's happening here is once you run this input command, it's going to basically print this value. Please type your name here. And because it's an input, you will see the cursor in front to type something. And once you type something and press enter, that will be basically stored in this variable. So whatever you type here will be stored in this variable, and that variable, when you print, will print the name, right? So for example, I'll run this. Now, when I run, you can see this text, please type your name here is here. That text is here. And then I get a text box to type something. So whatever you type will be stored in the variable called name. So if I type John now and press enter, you can see John is printed here. Why? This John was basically stored in name, and once I print name, it's going to print John. So this is one of the ways to get a user input on screen, right? Simply type this, right? Using the input command. So what do you mean by input command? It's going to take a user input and give you the output, right? So you can type anything. So I'll run this again to show you. So once you run this, you see you have the text here, right? So here if I say enter name, so I'll change this, enter name, right? And now I'll again run this. Now you can see it'll run. And so it's still running. If you see the asterisk sign, it means it's still running. I'll show you. Right. Okay. Okay, it's taking some time. Let me see why it is. Okay, I'll restart this. Right. Okay. So now you can see when I change this name, it's basically going to change here the same name, and I'll get the cursor to type, right? Get the cursor to type. So I can type anything here, right? So I can type the name, for example, if I say, so I'll continue. So we were talking about the control flow structures. So if I show you this simple example, here we have two variables. One has a variable called has COVID-19. Now for default value is false. And then you have another variable called dress code, and then that value is smart casual. So look at this very carefully. So you have this condition called if, which is a syntax. If this has COVID-19 is true, then the dress code should be with a mask, right? If it is not true, then the dress code is just without the mask. So you can see here, because this is false, that means this is, if this is false, then this will not work. This piece of code will only work if this variable is true. So now because this is false, this code, this part will not work because it doesn't execute this part of the code. This part of the code only will execute if this variable becomes true. So because of that, the output will be just dress code is smart casual, right? If I put true here, now, because this is true, now this piece of code will execute, and now my output will be dress code is dress code smart casual with a mask, right? So if I run this now, you can see I get the output smart casual with a mask because now it is true. So this is about if you put a if condition, if the condition is true, something will carry out. If it's not true, then it won't happen, right? So a very simple example. So that's one example. Again, another easy example here. So you have the marks as 56 and the status as fail. So if the marks is greater than or equal to 50, your status will be pass, or else the status should be fail. So because now the marks is 56, 56 is greater than 50, therefore my result should be pass. That's why I get the result pass. If I give something like 30 here, because 30 is basically less than 50, then the result should be fail, right? So if I run this, then you can see the result is fail. So what are we doing here? We are simply using conditions and checking the condition. Based on the condition, we are basically trying to carry out a task, or we will not carry out the task, right? So basically, you can use these kinds of conditional statements in Python to basically branch your application and basically make different results. So you can do many things like this, right? For example, let's say if I'll just do a simple example. Let me do like this. So I'll just uh, come in these two, and I'll say if the number, right? And I'll say number is number here. I'll create a variable called number equals, and I'll say number equals -6. Now I'm going to say if the number is greater than or equal to 0, then print it as positive, print positive, or else print negative. So what happens here, this I'll just remove this for now. Now, if you see this properly, in this example, I have a variable called number, and the value is -6. So what I'm doing is I'm giving a simple statement here. If the number is greater than or equal to 0, then the value should be positive. It should print positive. Or if it is not greater than 0, it should be negative. So the important thing here to note is you have this if and else, the keywords. If is to check the condition, and you can see you have this colon, two dots, the colon, and then this second line has an indent. See, it's not like this. You don't, if you write it like this, it is wrong. It should be indented, right? Have a tab space, right? So this indentation is very important in Python. This, why do you need this indentation? You having this indentation says that this line of code is inside this if condition. Otherwise, if you say like this, if you write it like this means this print statement is outside this if, then it is wrong, right? So make sure to, whenever you give if conditions with the two dots here, make sure the next line should be indented, right? Have a tab space. Similarly here, else, and then the two dots, the colon, and then again a tab space. That's how you have to write this, right? So if you don't have the tab space, it's wrong, right? So what should be the output here? So my number is -6. So -6 is not greater than 0. Therefore, I should get the result called negative, right? As you can see, I get the result called negative, right? So these are very simple examples to make you understand how to work with conditional statements, right? So you can see another example here. So if I see here, you have marks and equal to 66. If the mark, so this is an example to basically check just a single condition, only one condition. Now we look at how we can check multiple conditions. So here we have an example where you have the if condition. If the marks is greater than or equal to 75, your grade will be A. And then else, if you, when you want to give another condition, you use this elif syntax, elif. And then if the marks is greater than 65, it should be B. And if the marks is greater than 50, it should be C. And if the marks is greater than, not greater than 50, if it's less than 50, then you say it's fail. So you can do this very easily, okay? Right. So this is basically a very simple example. So according to this example, if the marks is 66, then I should get the result B, right? Because if the marks are greater than 65, I should get B. So any mark between 65 and 75 will be B. Greater than 75 will be A, and so on, right? So again, please don't do this again, right? Don't click on the screen and everything. Please stop this, right? Okay, so if I change the marks here, for example, if I say 76 here, now my grade should be A, right? 76 is basically greater than 75, right? Okay, so, right, so if I run this, you can see the grade is A, right? So that's how you can use conditional statements to basically carry out different things in Python. Right, so please stop pressing the escape button in the keyboard, right? I don't know what's going on here. I mean, you people, if you don't want to learn, just you can just leave, right? You don't have to be here, right? So next example, we'll talk about loops. So what do you mean by loops? It's like this. Let me take this here. So the now we'll talk about loops. So loops are basically used in programming, in not only in Python, any programming language, to basically do something, do a task again and again, right? So to do something again and again, we use loops. So basically, you can use loops to do different things. For example, let's say you want to print numbers from 1 to 10. So one thing that you can do, like what we have done already, as you have seen, is you can use the print command like this, and you can do print 1, and up to 10. You can have 10 print statements like this, right? One by one. You can just go on printing until 10, right? Print 1, print 2, print 3, print 4, print 5, and so on up to 10, right? You can just print up to 10, right? You can do that. But this is not the correct way to do this. You are not going to just keep on writing print statements. What we do is we are going to basically use something called loops. So what we do in loops is we are trying to just use one single print statement and basically iterate it again and again 10 times so that it will keep on printing from 1 to 10, right? So I'll show you a simple example how to do that. So you have different types of loops in programming. You have loops called while loop, and then you have for loop, and you have do while loop. These are the three types of loops that are available in programming. Python doesn't use do while loop. It only uses while and for. So we'll discuss these two, while and for, in Python, right? So I'll start with the while loop. So in while, what you do is you say while a condition is true, you do something, right? So while a condition is true, you basically carry out a task. For example, if I want to print from 1 to 10, what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply create a variable. Let's say I, any number, right? So say I equals 1. So I will give the starting value as 1. I'm going to create a variable. It can be any name, doesn't matter the name. So you give the starting value as 1 because I want to print from 1 to 10. So because of that, I create a variable and I assign that variable to 1. And then I'm saying if while I is less than, okay, while I, so here I'm saying while I is basically less than or equal to 10, what I'm going to do is I'm going to print I, right? Print I. And what happens here is, so I have my starting value as 1, and then I'm saying while this value is less than or equal to 10, keep on printing I, right? While this value is less than or equal to 10, I'm going to keep on printing I. So now I know the starting value and I know up to which value I should print. Up to, so this ending value also I know. So I know the starting value, I know the ending value. So you have 1 to 10. But the problem is I haven't set the program whether I should increase 1 by 1, 2 by 2, 3 by 3, 4 by 4, right? So you can say 1, 2, 3, 4, you can say 1, 3, 7, 9, right? You can say 1, 4, 9, you can do that as well. So you can increase in different numbers, right? You can say 1 by 1, 2 by 2, 3 by 3. So you should say the program to increase this 1 by 1, right? So for that, you should say after this, after the print statement, I'm going to increase I by 1. So for that, you say I equals to I plus 1. So what you mean by this is every time I'm going to say I'm going to increase I by 1 and assign it to I. So always what happens is this value of I will increase by 1. So here what happens now is first the value is 1. So 1 less than or equal to 10. Is it true? It is true, right? 1 is less than 10. Therefore, it will come down, print 1, and then here it will come here. So 1 plus 1 will be 2. New value of I will be 2. It will go back here. 2 less than 10, still okay. 2 is also less than 10. It will come down, print 2, and again come here. Now you have here you have 1 and 2. And then after 2 comes here, 2 will increase by 1, and then 2 will become 3. And it goes here, 3 less than 10, still okay, comes here, prints 3. And like that will go again and again. And once I becomes 10, 10 is equal to 10 because the equal sign is there. 10 is also going to be okay. This condition is still okay. If this equal sign is not there, then 10 is false, right? 10 is not less than 10. It is false. But because the equal sign is there here, 10 equal to 10 is correct. So it will come down, it will print 10. And then once it comes here now, 10 will be increased by 1 and 10 will become 11. And after that, when it comes here now, 11 less than or equal to 10 will be false and it will go out of the loop, right? So like that, it will start printing from 1 and it will only print up to 10, right? I hope you can understand. So this is why we use loops. We don't have to write print statements like this again and again. We can simply use loops to do the printing for us. So what we're going to do is we're going to use only one print statement and we are going to basically iterate it for 10 times. Then it will basically go and basically print all these values together, right? Okay. So I hope you understood that. So there are some examples given here. Let me show you an example. So I'll type something here. So I'll say type the same example here. So I'll say I equals to 1. So let me use the magnifying to make sure you see it properly, right? So I equals to 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the while loop while I is less than or equal to 10. And then I say the two dots and then I say print I, and then I equals to I plus 1. So now I have written the same thing here. Now what you should do is it should print from 1 to 10, right? So I'll just run this. You can see it prints from 1 to 10, right? So this is a starting value 1 up to 10. So if I say here 20, it will print from 1 to 20. You can see it prints from 1 to 20. If I change the starting value, if I say start from 15, now it's going to print from 15 to 20. So like that, you can just change the things and see by yourself. It will do that, right? So you can print different values using loops like this, right? So very easy. So what you have to understand is you should give the starting value and then the condition here. This is the condition. Once until this condition is false, it will work. Once this condition is false, it will stop, right? So until this condition is false, it will work. And that's how it happens in the loop, right? So that's how we use loops to do different things in Python, right? I hope you understood that. Okay. This is the while loop. Next, we will see how to do the same thing using the for loop. So before going into the for loop, let's basically go to the next example, right? Okay, not this one. Yeah, this one. All right. So in Python, you have something here. So let me maximize it for you to see it properly. Right. In Python, you have a function called range. So what does this range function do is, once you use this function, you can basically print sequence of numbers together. So it's a very important function. So I'll tell you a little bit about what this function is now. So this is what happens, right? So in this function, this range function, what happens is, let me remove this for now. So in the range function, whenever you give a value, what happens is it's going to print numbers starting always from 0, right? Always starting from 0. And the numbers will go up to value -1, right? It will go up to value -1. So if you say range 10, what should it print? It should print from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, not 10. See, always 1 minus this value. Starting from 0, 1 minus this value, 0 to 9, right? Okay. Do you understand? So if I say range 10, it will always start from 0 and go until 1 minus this value. 10 minus 1, 9. 0 to 9. Right? That's what happens in the range function. But yes, so if you just give a single value, it will always start from 0 and go up to the value -1. But let's say you want to start with a different value. For example, let's say you want to print from 10 to 20. Then how you should do? You can't just give one value, then you should give two values. So if you want to print from 10 to 20, what should you do? You'd say range, then say 10, comma, is it 20 or 21? So always the last value -1. So the starting value will be this, but ending value -1. So you should give 21. Otherwise, to print 20, should give always one more than the ending value. So when you say 10, comma 21, it will print from 10 to 20. So that's what happens when you say 10, comma 21. It will start from 10 and print up to 20, right? So this is the range function, just the basics of the range function. So this, why is this important? Now we learned two types. I said there are two types of loops in Python. You have the while loop and the for loop. So for the for loop, you basically use the range function to do the same thing, just like the while loop. In the for loop, you have to use the range function to basically loop and iterate your code, right? So we'll see that. So there are some very uh, interesting examples here. So if I show you some examples here, you can see range 10, it will go from 0 to 9. Range 1, comma 10, it will go from 1 to 9, right? So here you can see for I, look at this, for I in range 10, print I. So what will happen here? So when you say for the for loop, for I is basically a variable, any variable, you can give any name here, in range 10. So just make sure you remember the syntax. For I, okay, right. Someone is still playing around with the controls, so please don't do that, right? Okay. So here, when you say for I in range 10, what happens is there will be this variable called I. It will start from 0 and go up to 9. And when you print this variable I, you'll get the output from 0 to 9, like this, right? So the reason that you get commas here is because you are giving here end, you end all the values by a comma. We call this a delimiter. So one is to say always after the value, give a comma. So when you want to print values with commas, you can say end and then comma. So if I give something like this, semicolon now, and if I run this, you can see now it's semicolon instead of the comma, right? So you can do different things like this. So you can print different range of values using the range function by using a for loop. So the syntax is for a variable in range and then give the value. And once you print that variable, this variable catches this value and it will print all the values in this range function, right? That's how you do it. So for example, the last one, last example, let me open a new code here. Right. So I'm going to print the previous example. So in the while loop, I printed from 1 to 10. So how am I going to do it? I say for the any value, it can be I in range. Now I'm going to say 1, comma 11, right? And then say print I. So why did I say 1, comma 11? I want to print from 1 to 10. So if I want to print from 1 to 10, I give the starting value and always 1 more than the ending value because it always prints 1 less than the ending value. Therefore, I always give 1 more than the ending value. So it will start from 1 and go until 11 minus 1 is 10. So 1 to 10, right? So that's, if I run this, you can see I get the output 1 to 10, right? So this is a way to use the loop, the for loop, just like the while loop, to print numbers and to do the same thing again and again. So we are using only one print statement here, but we are looping this, or we are basically doing this print again and again for 10 times, and it will print you the 10 values, right? So these are very important things in Python programming, these loops, right? I hope you understood that part. Okay, right. 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 Next, we'll talk about functions. So these are very important functions. So what do you mean by a function in programming? So you can basically write a piece of code that you can use again and again in your program, right? So you can basically type like a template. So that template will be used again and again. For example, you can create addition function and use that addition function to add two numbers again and again, right? So you can create functions by yourself. There are also inbuilt functions as well, but you can create your own functions as well, right? So we'll see how we can do those things. So basically explain to you how we can do it. Okay. So what do you mean by a function is it is a reusable piece of code, right? So you can reuse this piece of code again and again. So you can only write it once and you can use it again and again without writing it again and again. You can just simply we call it calling the function. So we can just call the function again and again, and you can just use it anytime you want. So a simple example would be, for example, let me show you how we can write a simple function to add two numbers in Python, right? To add two numbers in Python. So any function should start with the syntax def, right? Define. So def, and then you should give the function name. So I'll say add, and within brackets you can give the we say this parenthesis. So within the parenthesis you give your parameters. So what do you mean by parameters is, now let's say I want to add two numbers, then I should have two variables to basically catch the two values I should add, right? So whenever you want to add two numbers, you need to have two variables to catch the numbers to add. So for example, I'll have two numbers called number 1 comma number 2, right? So the what do you call this number 1 and number 2? These are called parameters. These parameters are there to catch the values to add. So you'll understand when I basically show you what happens. So why do you need this is, so why did I use only two variables here? Because I am only going to write a function to add two numbers. If someone asks you to write a function to add three numbers, then you should have three variables here, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to return the value, return number 1 plus number 2. A very simple function. So it takes two numbers and then it returns. You return means it will just give out from the function, it will give out the addition of these two numbers. So this is the template of the code. This is the function. So once I write this function, I don't need to write this again and again. I can use this function many times. For example, if I want to use this function, I can say, for example, print. And then if I want to use this function, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the same name called add here, add, and then I can give two values, for example, 5, 6. So then what will happen? I'll get the value 11 here as the output. So what happened here when I say add 5, 6, what happens is this add the program will basically know, okay, it searches for the add function. It will go here, it sees, okay, this is the add function. And then this number 5, this 5 will be taken by number 1, 6 will be taken by number 2, add the two numbers and give the result back here, right? So how do you understand this? You use the same name as the function that you defined here, and then you give the same name, and then you can give the values for these numbers. So then 5 becomes number 1, 6 becomes number 2, and you add them and you get the result. So simply the beauty of this is you can again use it any number of times. You can again use the function to add different values. Example 20, 30. Right? Now you can see I can use this function without basically writing this code again and again. This is only written once, but I can use this again and again. See, same function. I can use this multiple times by only writing the function once. So that's the beauty of functions. You can just define your function and you can use the function again and again, right? That's the thing about functions. So you can use this same function to basically do different tasks once you clearly define your function once. So like this in your programming in future, you'll understand that you will be writing many functions to do many things. So all these large applications are basically broken down into small functions, and you see there are only small pieces of functions that are working. So for every task, there's a function. So you have to just write those functions and then those will work, right? Okay. Right, so let's see the example. So I'll just write the same example here so that you understand. So I'll write a function to add two values, define, add, and then I'll give two numbers, the same example I discussed earlier, number 1, comma, number 2, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to return number 1 plus number 2, right? After I do this, right, now in my code, I'm going to just print two numbers. So to use the function, I should write the same name. I can't write any other name. I should write the same name, right? So I write the same name here, add, and give two numbers, 5, 6. I'll do the same thing again for different number and show you that it still works. So I'll say 20, 30, right? Now if I run this, you can see I get the output as 11 and 50. How did it come? 11 means 6 plus 5 and 20 plus 30 means 50. So this function is working. I only wrote this function once and it works now, right? So you can write your own functions like this and make sure it works properly, right? Okay. So hope you understood what functions are. So I'm not going to go into detail because this is not a very extensive course. I'm just going to introduce to you what these are and simply and to understand how you can do this. So this is how you write a function. So what's important is every function will start with the keyword def, and then you write the function name. And inside the parentheses, you have to have parameters depending on how what you want to do. And then you can do different things inside the function, right? Okay. So simple example to understand function. There are many examples here in this document, which I'll show you what you can do, right? Okay, right. Next, we're going to look at something called lists. Now, why do you need lists? What do you mean by a list and why do you need a list? We'll talk about these things. Now, I'll talk about that. So now, if you take a variable, we discussed variables at the start of this lecture series. So in a variable, how many values can you store? So if someone asks you how many values that you can store in a variable, what should be your answer? Can anyone try to guess? How many values can you store in a variable? Yes? Anyone? So for those who have been listening properly, you can answer. So how many values can we store in a variable? Right. So basically you can store only one, right? So as you can see, if I say marks, right? Mark equals 76. So you can see only one value. I can't say 76, comma 55, comma 54, comma 32. I can't do this. This is wrong, right? So a single variable can only have one value. It can't have multiple values. But there are some instances where you need to store multiple values uh, together, right? Other than storing just a single value, you might want to basically store multiple values together. So for instances like that, you need to use something called lists. That is there in Python. So you have list. So a list is basically used. It is basically a container to store multiple values, right? It's basically a container to store multiple values. So whenever you want to define a list, it basically the symbol is the two square brackets. So the two square brackets basically define lists in Python, right? So whenever you want to define a list, it should be defined within two square brackets. So we'll see that. So this is some example here. You can see here, I have a list called number list and have two numbers, 10, 20. So let me go back and show you what this is. So I'll show you a simple example of how we can work with lists. Let's say I want to create a list. I'll say list one equals within square brackets. I can type in anything, couple of numbers. So I give a couple of numbers, 10, 20, 30, so on, right? Now, whenever you define a list like this, now this list has three numbers, right? It has three numbers. The important thing about this is always there is an index. You basically refer to these numbers using a address. So whenever you have a list like this, a lot of numbers, Each number will have its own address. Like we have our own address. These numbers will have its own address. Always the address will start from 0. So this number value 10 will be 0. Next one will be 1, 2, so on, right? So always the first value will be starting from the address 0. We call it index. So index of 10 is going to be is 0. Index of 20 is 1. And similarly, index of 30 it should be 2. So it basically goes like a sequence, right? Starts from 0 and then goes to 1, 2, 3, so on. So if I had like this, for example, 40, 50. So what should be the index of 50? It should be 4, right? So here 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's how you basically assign the index, right? So what's the beauty of this kind of lists is whenever you have a list like this, whenever you want to print a value, let's say you want to print this value, you call this by the index. For example, if I want to print 30, I say print and then give the name of the list. Name of the list is list 1. So list 1. And then within square brackets, I should give the address. So if I want 30, I should give 0, 1, 2. So when I say is list 1 and the index 2, it will print 30 here. That's how you print specific values in a list. This is how you create a list, and this is how you print specific values in a list. So you can print values like this using the index, right? Using the index. Okay. So that's how you print these values. So we'll see an example, like a simple example. Right. So I'm going to show you a simple example of how you can do that. So let me create a simple list here. List 1 equals, and I'll say 10, 20, 30. And I'm going to print the second item of the list. That will be list 1. Let's say I will print this one, right? I want to print this 20. So 0, 1, 2, this index is 1. So now if I basically run this, okay, okay, what happened here? Right. Okay. Okay. Let me just print like this. Interesting. Right. See why that is. Okay, so it should work now. Right. Right. So basically, we'll see. So here is just a simple example here as well. So we have a list called number list, and you have two values here. So the first value will be index 0, and the next value will be index 1. So forget about these two. Don't worry about these two lines for now. I'll just uh, ignore these two lines. So I'll tell you. So to basically ignore a line or not to execute that line, you should use something called comments. You call them comments. So this to comment a line in Python, you use the hash symbol, right? So when you use the hash symbol, what happens is it will ignore the line. It will not basically execute the line. So you can see whenever I put a hash, these things are basically going to be ignored, right? So remember that one. So here, if I say a number list here, and then 0, the 0th value, that means I should get the value 10. So you can see here, the value 10 is there, right? So whenever you give the index, it should print the value, right? So that's how it happens. So just if I basically give this first value, the index 1, it should print 20, right? You can see it prints 20, right? So you can do like that. So you can just print values by defining a list. So why do you need a list? A list is basically used to store multiple values, right? not just single values, to store multiple values. Now, if I just ask you a question, if you are wondering now, then you have multiple values like this. Okay, you have multiple values like this. So you can obviously create lists and then basically print individual values. But how can you print all the values together? Now, whenever you give the name of the list, then it will print the list, but it will have the square brackets. See? It will have the square brackets. But if you want to print these numbers without the square brackets, only the three numbers, what can you do? What can you do? So what you can do is you can use the concept that we learned earlier. You can use loops. And with a loop, you can basically print all the numbers together. Right? We'll see how we can do that. So I'm going to just simply use a while loop to print all the numbers here in the list, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say while, I'll say I equals 0, starting from 0, while, okay, I less than or equal to. So what should it be the number? So I should go from the index 0 to 0, 1, 2. So I should say 0 up to 2. Why? This index, when you have three values, it starts from 0, 1, 2. Right? And then I'm going to print this number list, but now the index, instead of the value I should give here, the index should be I, right? I. Right? So I'll just comment these two as well, just to make sure it's not clear. So it's basically make sure it's more clear. Now, what happens here now? I have given a loop, a while loop, and using the while loop, I'm printing all the numbers of the list, right? Okay. And then I should say I equals I plus 1. Otherwise, it will not know to go from one place to another. So it will now go from 0, 1, 2, and print all the values, right? So when I execute this, you can see all these values now are printed together, right? So you can see you can use the loop like we discussed last, and you can use that to print the whole list at once, right? Now you don't have the square brackets or anything. So see, if you had this, if you just printed the name of the list, you printed the name of the list, you get it in square brackets, see? But if you want to get only the values, then you should use a loop like this. Then it will print all the values like this, right? So that's how you use loops to work with lists. So a list is basically a kind of a container where it's also like a variable. The only difference is you can store multiple values in a list. Okay, I hope you understood that one. Right. So like list, there's something very similar to list called tuples in Python. So a tuple is also just like a list. It's also, the only difference is instead of using square brackets, you use parentheses, right? So we'll see that. So tuples are just like lists. The only difference is instead of using this, if I want to create a tuple, so tuple, you give it in parentheses. That's the difference. And the biggest difference between lists and tuples is you can't change a list, but you can change the tuple, right? So that's the important. You can't change the values here. After you define the list, you can't change a list. But tuples you can change, right? That's the difference between lists and tuples. So if I just do something like this, all the other things are similar, right? So the only difference is the instead of square brackets, you use parentheses, right? That's the only difference. But all the other things are same. What we have discussed so far, those are same. So as you can see in this example, you can see here, I have a tuple called persons, and you have three values, Kalum, Kalinga, Mongol, and Vidura. And then I'm printing this tuple. You can see it prints all the values. Now, if I basically print this like this, print persons and the value 2, 0, 1, 2, it should only print this value, right? You see, you can see it prints only this value. See, so if I give an index, it will print the appropriate value, or you can, if you give the name of the tuple, it will print all the values together, right? So like this, you can use tuples to basically store multiple values as well. So what is the difference between tuples and lists? In lists, you can't change the value, but in tuples, you can, right? That's the difference. Okay, right, right. Okay. So before going into the next thing, so let me go to the next one here. Right. So you have import statements. Now in Python, now the reason why people use Python for many things these days and why it's very popular is because there are many libraries which are already made for you. You can just use those libraries and use the functions which are available in those libraries without writing the code by yourself. That's one of the reasons why people go for Python. So there are many libraries which are already available when you install Python. So when you want to basically import a library to your program, you should use the import statement, right? So you say import and give the name of the library, and then it will basically import that library to your program, right? So such a library that is already available with Python is called the math library, which has a lot of mathematical functions like you can do trigonometry things, you can do basically log values, you can do many mathematical functions using the math library, right? So for that, you need to just install and just import the math library. So when you want to import something, you say import and then give the name of the library. This is very important because in future, when you are doing the other things like image processing and machine learning, you'll have to import a lot of libraries in your code. So whenever you want to import third party or other libraries, you should use this keyword called import and give the name of the library, right? So the reason this works is because this math library comes with Python by default, right? So the math library will come with Python by default. But there are some libraries that doesn't come with Python. So if, for example, I'll say import, let's say scikit-learn. Now see what happens. It gives me error. No module name scikit-learn. Why? This library doesn't come with Python by default. So whenever you have libraries that doesn't come with Python by default, you should install those libraries first. So now we are going to look at how you can install libraries for Python in your machine. It's very important. So I'll tell you a different way of installing the libraries when we go for the machine learning section. But for today, I'm just going to tell you how you can do this in your own computer, right? So we'll see that. So whenever you want to install a library, first you need to go to the installation directory of Python. So once you install Python in your machine, it will get installed into this default location. So the location will be this, right? So your Python will be there. You can find Python in C drive, right? In your C drive, and then users inside the users folder. So I'll go like this to show you better. So inside the C drive, right? Inside the C drive, in the users folder, in your folder, then the use of your admin user, this will be your name in your computer name. And then you have a hidden folder called app data, right? So if you don't see this, you should unhide using these three dots. You have to go to options and you need to basically hide or basically unhide, show the hidden files. I'm sure a lot of you people know how to hide and unhide files in your computer, right? These days with all these things, I'm sure you know how to do this. So unhide all the files and then you'll see a folder called app data, which is inside C drive, users, and your folder, your user folder, admin folder, right? So go to app data and then local, app data, local, and then programs, right? And here you see Python, right? So this is the default installation location of Python. Whenever you download and install Python into your machine, this will be the path. C users, your use admin folder, app data, local programs. This will be the path. It's a very long path. So this will be the path where these libraries will be installed. So go inside Python, and then there is a folder called scripts. You can see a folder called scripts. Go inside that folder, and whenever you go inside that folder, you'll see many things here, right? Okay, let me see many things here. Okay, you can see a application called pip. See, you can see an application called pip. See, what do you mean by this pip? Pip is the Python package manager, right? Remember, this pip is the software that manages all the packages in Python. So packages means libraries. So basically, whenever you want to install a library, you should use this pip command. This pip command, right? So it's very important. So whenever you want to install a new library, should go to this location where Python is installed and go to the scripts folder. Inside the scripts folder, open a command prompt. How do you do that? Just click on this URL here, this path, and then type cmd and press enter. And then you see the command prompt appearing here. How did I do that? I went to the URL here, the path, the folder path, clicked on the folder path and type cmd and press enter. And then you see your command prompt opening here. So whenever you want to install a library, you say pip install and give the name of the library, right? Name of the library, right? Remember this. Whenever you want to install a library, you say pip install and then name of the library here, right? So this is really pip install. So pip is basically the package manager for Python. It manages all the libraries of Python. So whenever you want to install libraries for image processing, whenever you want to install libraries for machine learning, all these things can be installed using pip by using the command pip install. Okay, I hope you got that. These are you install libraries for your computer, right? So today, in the next part, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the fundamentals of image processing. So for that, I have prepared a small file, which I'll tell you what that file is. So this is basically prepared in a cloud service called Google Colab. I'll introduce you Google Colab in the next session. For now, I'll just show you what this is, right? So to do image processing in Python, you have a library called OpenCV. Okay, to do image processing in Python, you have a library called OpenCV, which is basically stands for Open Computer Vision, right? So computer vision library is basically used to do image processing. So you can do different processing tasks for images by using this OpenCV library, right? So to install this OpenCV library, what you have to do is, like I showed you earlier, go to that location and you should say in the command, you should type, right? You should type pip install OpenCV -Python. This is the command to basically install OpenCV in your machine. So OpenCV pip install OpenCV -Python. Once you do this, OpenCV will be installed in your computer and you can use the OpenCV library to basically do image processing in your computer, right? So whenever you want to install the OpenCV, first install Python and then go to this location inside the scripts folder and then execute the command pip install OpenCV-Python, right? Okay. So once you do that, OpenCV will be installed in your computer. And after that, you can basically import the library like we discussed earlier. Using the import statement, you can say import CV2. So then when you say CV2, the computer vision library will be imported into your program. So I'm going to just run this now. Right. So it will run and then, so it's still executing. Right. Okay, it has run now. So the green color tick means it has finished running. So now this open computer vision library is basically imported into my program. Now we'll see some basic image processing tasks that you can do, right? The syntax and everything. So I have here, I will simply upload a image, right, to this place. I'll upload an image. Let me upload an image to this place. Okay. So I'll go to desktop. I have some image here. Yeah, I'll take this image, the fruit basket, and then I'll drag that and drop it to this place, the place that I'm working here. So I'll tell you all these things in the next session, how you can work with Google Colab. And now I have, you can see the images here, right? Now, in order to load the image, you have this command. So I create a variable like in Python, image equals. Now, here I have imported the library CV2. I'm using this library and the functions which are inside this library to import and load the image. So I'm saying CV2 dot imread, image read. So what do you mean by image read? Read the image, right? Read the image. So CV2 dot read the image and give it, you should give the image, the path for the image. So my image is here, same place, fruitbasket.jpg. So I'm giving the name of the image here and read it as a color image. In read color means read it as a color image. You can also read it as black and white. So this is to say, read this image as a color image. So once I run this, right, I'll run this and show. So it will run, and then you can see here, you don't see the image. When I show the, you show the variable, you see an array or you see a lot of numbers. See? What are these numbers? These, so any image is composed of pixels, right? Small tiny squares called pixels, and all those pixels will have values going from 0 to 255. What do you mean by 0 to 255? Any squares with 0 will be black, 255 will be white, and all the others in between will be the other colors. So there are, there will be many matrices here. So you see a lot of numbers. There are other numbers which are not shown here. So a combination of all those values will make, all those pixel values will make the image, right? To show your image, to display your image on screen, there's another command in the OpenCV library called CV2 imshow, right? When you show the image, imshow, it will basically show the image. As you can see, the fruit basket is shown. See, right? So I'll go from this here. I think you can see the fruit basket is shown here, right? CV2.imshow. So now there are many functions inside this CV2 library, like you can basically convert the color into black and white. You can blur the image. You can basically extract all the contours, all the edges of the image. So you can use these functions. Very easy, just use the function and it will do all these things for you. So I'll show you some examples here. When you want to convert to grayscale, you have this CVT color to gray. You have this color to gray. So this command will basically convert your image to grayscale. You can see here, the command has converted the image to grayscale, right? So how did this happen? This function came from the computer vision library. You haven't coded anything. You haven't write your own code. You have just used the function that was already given to you by this library, and you have used this to just convert this image into grayscale, right? So this is an example to convert this image into grayscale. And here, the next one, you can blur the image using the Gaussian blur, which is available in the computer vision library. You can see this, when you compare this image and this image is a little blurred, right? These are all different functions that you can apply for the images using the image processing tool, the OpenCV library in Python, right? So you can blur the image, you can threshold. So when you threshold, what happens is, once you give a value, the white color parts will remain and the other parts will be black. So you can see like an outline in black and white, right? So if you see the threshold, you can see the black and white threshold, see? So the white color parts will remain. You can take the edges like a pencil sketch. It looks like a pencil sketch, right? These are your threshold images. And then finally, you can detect the edges. If you want to detect the edges of this image, all the contours of the image, you can use an algorithm called canny edge detection, which is also available in the image processing library. You can see it has detected all the edges. See? So all these things can be done by using the Python OpenCV image processing library. So I'm not going to go into detail about this. You can just search for these different functions which are available in the OpenCV library. So it's very easy. You can just see it's just one line code, right? Just a one single line code. You can just go and see what are these and how you can work with these. So you can do different functions. You can do different processing tasks for these images, and it will basically help you work with these things. So these are very important when you go into your artificial intelligence based applications. Before you feed an image to your model, you should first process the image. So to process the image, you use this OpenCV library and you do all these processing tasks with them, right? So this is just a very small brief introduction to image processing with OpenCV. I haven't taught you some extensive things because of the time and we have. So this is just an example of what you can do with this OpenCV library. So go and explore this OpenCV library. There are many articles and out there which says how you can do this and many examples. You can try them by yourself and see how you can work with these images, right? So this is how you can do image processing. So in the next session, which will be there, I'll basically introduce you to Google Colab, which is what you see here, the Google Colab. This is a basically a cloud service given by Google to basically run your machine learning models in the cloud rather than running it in your computer, which is very good because to run machine learning models, you need a very high computing power. So normally a lot of computers that we have doesn't have that much of power. So you can use this cloud service called Google Colab to basically run your models in this. So I'll show you how to basically do that in the next session and how you can use this and also how you can basically create your own environment to install libraries in the way that you need for different artificial intelligence tasks. So you don't normally install libraries the way that I just showed you. Whenever you want to install libraries for machine learning tasks, you need to do it in a different way. So I'll tell that part as well in the next session. This is just an introduction. So I know I haven't taught you extensively. I have just gone through some very quickly. I just showed you these topics. This Python is not so normally a Python course will be taught for you like for around 3 months, right? The whole course. So I'm just doing it in like 1 hour, which is not easy. So this is not like to explain to you. This is not like a normal lecture, right? Remember, this is not like to go and tell you exactly what exactly this Python does and everything. This is just to introduce you to this programming language and what you can do with it. And now it's your task to basically try out these examples and see how you can work with this, right? Similarly, for image processing, you have OpenCV library, and for that also you can just go through the articles and see how you can use these codes and work with them. So I'll share all these resources I have already shared as well. I'll share all these things with you, and then you can go through the codes and you can try by yourself and how to do this, right? So I hope that you understood the session. So I'll wind up for today and just a small note before winding up. So I mean, there were some disturbances in this session, unfortunately. I just want to tell you that look, I know that there are people that want to learn, and some people just have might want to just have fun and things like that. I know it's in your age you do these things and thinking. So these sessions, remember that I'm not just coming here to do this with anything. I'm also very busy, and I'm coming to do this session. And if you don't want to listen, you can not join. Please don't disturb the others, right? So just a small note there. So don't make sure you won't do that to the next session because it's going to be a very serious and very important session. So make sure you don't disturb in the middle. Okay, right. So I'll stop for today. Then I'll hand over to the organizing people. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your knowledge and make the session much more valuable. And sir, I would like to apologize for our mistakes and I appreciate your cooperation in handling this situation and allowing the session to continue successfully. Once again, I apologize for any errors from our end and thank you for your understanding. Sir, we are ready with a small token of appreciation. Please accept this, sir, with the most heartfelt gratitude.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's time to you to clarify your doubts. If you have any questions directed to Sir, please use the raise hand option and we'll give you a chance to unmute yourself. We have 10 minutes to clarify your matters related to session. Your time starts now. If you have any questions, please use the raise hand option. We'll give you a chance to unmute yourself. There's one question, sir. One asked whether tuples can or cannot be changed while lists can be modified.
Yeah, so I think maybe what happens is like this. So in lists, you can't basically you can I think I made a small mistake while explaining lists and tuples. So let me go back to that. So it's like this. When you create a list, you can modify lists, right? You can change the values, but in tuples, you can't change the values, right? For example, let me just clarify that out. So I'll share the screen once more. So it's like this. Now you can see to a list and a tuple that is created here. You can't do something like this. For example, list one. And let's say I want to change this value 20, right? To let's say something like 30. So if I say list, so if I want to change this value 20, what should I do? I should first basically access this value using the index. So what should be the index of 20? It should be 0, 1, right? So list 1. If I want to make it 30, I say equal to 30. So for lists, I can do this, right? So lists you can change. This is okay for lists. This is possible, right? This is possible. Right? That's fine. But if you do the same thing for tuples, if I do the same for tuples, in tuples, you can't do this. In tuples, you can't change the value. This is not possible. Right? This is the difference between lists and tuples. So lists, you can change the value, but tuples, you can't. Right? You can't modify the value. Once you create the list, that's it. You can't modify later. You can't modify the values later. I hope I answered the question and clarified the doubt, right?
Thank you, sir. Seems there are no more questions. So once again, I would like to thank you, sir, for your great support. That is a kind reminder for all the participants. We are having our second session tomorrow at 7 p.m. and hope you'll join the session. Before conclude the session, we request all of you to switch on your cameras to take a group photograph, and you can use the virtual background we have dropped in the chat box. We'll give you 2 minutes to get ready and then let's capture the photograph. Please switch on your cameras. Kind reminder, please switch on your cameras. Let's do a countdown. 3, 2, 1. Thank you, everyone. Now it's time to conclude today's session. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Wishing you success on your journey ahead. Have a nice day. I'm Kasanthi Neelagola, signing off as today's moderator. Thank you.